What you'll have many times with couples, you'll have one that overspends by dimes consistently, and then the other one overspends by dollars occasionally. And they tend to point at each other as the culprit when they're both doing it. They're just doing it in different ways.
All right, I'm here with John Forbes and the F Words podcast, and today we're diving into one of life's biggest decisions, how love and money shape our relationships and our future. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, good to be here. Thanks, Nick.
As we make decisions in life that affect our finances, one of the biggest ones is who we choose to spend our life with. So as a financial advisor, how does this decision and the conversations that come with it affect people's money and their future?
Oh, it has a huge impact, Nick. It's what's that song, Love and Marriage, go together like a horse and carriage. It's when people get married, almost always one of the first marital discussions that gets heated is about money. And unfortunately, 40, 50, 60 years later, it can still be about money. Getting on the same page when it comes to finances is a critical first step to not just financial success, but emotional and mental success as a couple.
So the question that I had today that kind of like is going to frame the rest of this discussion is, what is the financial conversation you're not having with your partner? And how could that impact your future? If you're talking to a client, what's that conversation that you're like, hey guys, you really need to talk about this?
And this comes from personal experience as well. As Karen and I have kind of worked through things, I think what couples need to recognize is everyone has a different normal. We all grow up with a different normal. For some people, when they think of finances growing up, it was ugly. It was horrible. Mom and dad fought all the time. Creditors were calling. We never had money for anything. Checks would bounce. It just that could be one person's normal. Another person's normal could be fairly comfortable life growing up. There weren't a lot of financial headaches or heartaches. Maybe they didn't have everything, but there was never stress financially. And then when those two people get together, their normals dictate what they just assume that the other person has experienced, and that assuming is what causes big problems, not just with finance, but with everything. So the sooner a couple can have a conversation about finances and understand that your normal is not going to be the same as my normal, that's okay. But we just got to figure out what we want normal to look like for us and for our kids and for our family.
So, I think you probably just sort of tiptoed into my next question a little bit here, but why do so many relationship conflicts stem from money? Why is that one of the biggest fights that a couple will ever have?
It gets back to, Nick, what so much about finances and money we develop at a very, very early age. And when we assume that this is how everyone else does it, if you come from a family where spending was pretty common and you spent first and saved later, and your spouse came from where they sacrificed and didn't do, that if that's your normal, when you see somebody who likes to spend money and spends it wildly based on your normal, it creates tension. It creates a lot of tension, and just having those conversations, the earlier you can have those types of conversations, the better. The biggest financial frustration that most couples face revolve around credit cards. Spending money that you don't have for things you don't need can create a lot of tension. And credit card and debt management is the leading lightning rod when it comes to financial stress in a relationship.
Well, you said in one of our earlier episodes too that if you're sitting on thousands of dollars of credit card interest, that are chalking up, 20% interest or something like that, setting money aside from a rainy day or putting a little bit of money in your 401k is almost not a thing that makes sense if you're racking up these giant debts. I think that your exact line is like, I can do well, but 20% interest is not a thing that anybody's doing.
One of the most common mistakes I see is a couple will realize, okay, yeah, we're in a credit card bind, we're in a jam, and they identify it, which is good. And the solution is, hey, I found a 0% credit card that we can transfer to for 6 months. Okay, we've addressed the pain of additional interest for a few months, but how did we get here in the first place? That doesn't address the symptoms that caused the issue in the beginning. So transferring money to a 0% credit card feels like a solution, but it's not a solution. It's sticking the finger in one of the 7 holes in the wall, and at least slowing the dripping. But the hardest part is understanding, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And be honest, because what you'll have many times with couples, you'll have one that overspends by dimes consistently, and then the other one overspends by dollars occasionally, and they tend to point at each other as the culprit. When they're both doing it, they're just doing it in different ways. And just acknowledging we cannot spend money we don't have. We cannot do it. And address that first. Then let's find, okay, a temporary solution might be a 0% credit card. But it's a 0% credit card with a strategy to get it paid off in X number of months. And until you do that and address how did we get here in the first place and what do we need to change on that end, you'll be right back in the same position again 2 or 3 years from now.
I want to pause and come back to something you just said, which is like, in a relationship, there's usually one person who overspends by dimes, and they do it all the time. And then there's one person who overspends by dollars and then does it doesn't do it very often, but then all of a sudden is going to, go buy something really expensive. And then they kind of point at each other. Mm-hmm. That clicked for me so hard because that's me and my wife. Yeah. My wife is the person who, is going to go out to eat or run by Starbucks or something like that. And I look at her and just like, oh, that's crazy. I can't believe you're spending $7 again on a Starbucks drink, and then I'll come home with some, $1,000 toy or whatever stupid thing, and I know that causes her stress. And to me, I'm like, well, yeah, but I never spend money outside of that. That's such a powerful explanation. I would be really curious, like, how many other people that resonates with, who are like, which one are you, right? Yeah. Which one of those two people are you?
Those arguments where one person's saying yeah, but, and the other one's saying I know, but, and they're both right. They're both right. To point out the thing that you see may be obvious in the other partner, but until you take ownership of your own issue as well, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. So when you look at financial stress, especially, because I think this has a really big impact, why does it affect sort of the intimacy between a couple? Just being able to be emotional and connected. Why does stress hit that long-term relationship satisfaction so hard?
At the end of the day, financial stress is fear. It's fear of what's happening. We're not in control. We're not under control. And then you're quick to point a finger at why, and it's usually not at yourself. So my personal experience as well as professional is that doesn't lead to intimacy very, very effectively. So yeah, finances are more often than not the hot button that can have a devastating effect on other aspects of the relationship.
There's a quote that I love, and I've never thought about it in this context, but it's kind of based on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's hard to fall in love while you're drowning. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of just applying that to drowning in debt. It's hard to fall in love when you're drowning in debt. It's hard to remember to go dance with her. It's hard to remember to help her cook dinner. It's hard to remember to buy her a Valentine's Day card if you're dodging debt collector calls. It's like that pressure takes all of the attention off of the good and focuses on something really bad.
Yeah, it does. It steals joy. You become distracted with the negative instead of fostering and remembering and celebrating the positive.
I love that. John, do you have any stories about people, and I know that you can't name names and things like that, but I mean, do you have any stories about people that you've worked with or people that you've known that found success after addressing sort of money issues, like getting that elephant, to the point where they can talk about it and being able to move past it in a powerful way?
To kind of broaden the conversation a little bit, because I know we're really focused on debt, because credit card debt is a financial and emotional killer. But I also see it on the other end when you get couples that are financially doing great, successful, but it comes time to start talking about, okay, are we going to retire? Or are we going to slow down? And the anxiety over spending, because what if our income goes down? Can we really do it? And seeing where couples have struggled with comfortably gearing down their lifestyle, a semi-retirement or whatever it might be, over fear of a financial meltdown. And again, it's not only just the life experience that they've had; it's what they grew up with and what they remember money being, and maybe watching their parents or grandparents go through that retirement transition and not having success. So it's not just debt that can create the issue. It is anytime you're having potentially a major financial change in your life, that it can rock that relationship pretty significantly.
Well, you just talked about how there's like sort of different people in relationships, the person who overspends by dime and the person who overspends by dollars. And I kind of wonder if that parallels into retirement too, when you have, the person who is like chomping at the bit and they're so excited to retire and this is the best idea ever. And then the other person who is not ready to retire and who's worried about all the finances. Like, do you find that dynamic in relationships a lot?
Oh yeah, and what we see is usually, I think I'm going to start with it. Listen to your spouse. Listen to your spouse, because I think of a situation where a couple where the husband retired, and he was able to rationalize why he thought he could do why he could do it, why it would work, and his wife was concerned because she said, "Look, when you're home and you're not working, you're going to go out and you're going to buy a lawn tractor. You're going to go buy this, and you're going to start spending money that you're not spending right now. I know you, and that's what you're going to do." And he kind of denied it. Well, about 5 years into retirement, we were dipping into principal. We were dipping into way more than what we had originally planned. And he did have to acknowledge and come around and say, okay, this isn't going to work. I can't keep doing this. And they turned that corner, but his wife saw that way before he saw it. But oftentimes there is one partner who will be that yeah but person, and yeah but this is just a one-time thing. Well, when you have a one-time thing 3 times a year, it's not a one-time thing. It's a spending habit that has to be addressed.
Yeah, no, that's important. So, like, how do couples like sort of identify and prioritize their shared financial goals? Because if the problem is really communication, what are the steps that they can take to have that communication effectively?
Nick, it can be really hard, because I've seen it kind of go both ways. There are many couples where there's one half of the couple is not really interested in money, not interested in finances, doesn't want to have it, doesn't want to get overwhelmed with it. And so the other one kind of takes charge of that area. And then there's other areas in the relationship where the other partner kind of takes the lead. So it's not that you have to force people who are not comfortable making those types of decisions together, as long as there's an understanding and a communication to the spouse that's not as actively involved in the finances. Maybe even just like a quarterly update. Hey, here's where we're at. Here's where we were. Here's what we were trying to accomplish. Here's where we're at. And the spouse that's not as interested in finances doesn't have to be engaged daily in it. It gets back to communication. They just need to be aware and feel comfortable and confident that they are heading the right direction.
Yeah, there's that thought too about if you're going down the block and you're 1 degree off of course, you're still going to be together, a block away, 2 blocks away. If you're traveling all the way around the world and you're 1 degree off, you're going to end up in a totally different place. And so, when people are aligning their values when it comes to spending, when it comes to saving, when it comes to investing, it's got to be important to sort of like figure out where you're going. Like, what do you actually want at the end? Like, what's the outcome you're after? That has to be an important conversation, right?
Sure, and I think we have to look at it as the United States. We're striving to be a more perfect union. Well, in a marriage, you're striving to be more perfect. You're not going to be perfect right off the bat, but if you're both kind of aiming the same direction and open to communicating, I think we can all stand to be better communicators. And I look back on gosh, Karen and I have been married almost 35 years now. It's not, we've not always done a good job of communicating about many things, including finances. So it's a work in progress, and don't feel devastated if your spouse or your partner doesn't engage the way you would like them to right away. Just have it as something you're just trying to get 1% better.
This question came up when I was sort of digging into this is like, do you have any thoughts or advice on whether a couple should merge finances, keep them separate, use a hybrid approach? Is there anything that like really works or really doesn't? Is there a piece of advice that you would give about like how couples interact their finances together?
And this, I sound like a broken record today, Nick, but it gets back to what's their normal. I've seen couples be very successful where they each run their own finances. They've got their own checkbook, and they agree on who pays what bills. And they kind of get that split according to income, and then they both just kind of work on their own. And you can be successful that way. I've got couples where they'll have two checking accounts, but both names are on both accounts, and they just kind of each one serves as the primary on their own account. But they work together again, communicating what bills are you going to pay, which out of that account, what am I going to pay out of this account. So I find it in this day and age, it's really, really hard to be completely joint all in from day one, because if you each have a debit card and somebody spends something that the other one didn't know was getting spent, and it's all coming out of the same bucket, that can create some tension. So I think if you can kind of have a hybrid where we're in this together, there's your money's my money's your money. Here's your responsibilities. This is your lane. This is my lane financially, and let's continue to communicate and stay in touch and have at least a quarterly conversation on how are we doing.
Do you do anything like when you first sit down with clients, or maybe people you've worked with for a long time, where you like seed or help them start these conversations? Is there any sort of like thought starters, tips and tricks that you might be able to share?
It is great to use a financial advisor in that. It's an independent person who kind of initiates the conversation, and that way, because many times, again, depending on what your normal is with your communications, if one spouse brings up something about finances, the other one might get super defensive right away and does not hear what that person's saying, and it spins out of control from the beginning. When you can have an independent outside person kind of just initiate the conversation and set. We call it homework when people come in. We'll come in, we'll have a conversation, especially when I'm meeting with clients, potential clients for the first time. There are many times people will come in and I'm like, okay, investing is not what we need to do right now. Here's your homework and here's your plan. This is what I want you to shoot for 6 months, 12 months down the road. And then shoot me an email, give me a call, let me know how you're progressing on those things. And it oftentimes, especially with younger couples, it is, let's get debt under control. Let's get a savings cushion built up. It would be great to be investing right now, but we got to get the foundation right first. So coming to a financial advisor that can kind of initiate that conversation and guide that conversation without having the emotional history behind it that the couple might otherwise have can be very, very beneficial.
Yeah, I imagine that there are many times where, almost like a therapist or a marriage counselor, that like just being the level head in the room to go like, hey, both people have good points here. Let's talk about it. Let's guide the conversation can make such a big difference.
Well, and I've said for many years now, most people think as a financial advisor, my primary responsibility and job is in investment management, and it's really not. It's in behavior management. And it can encompass so many things, from saving to spending to risk management to goal setting to so many different aspects that having that outside that outside ears and eyes get involved in engaging that conversation can be really, really beneficial.
And I imagine too that like, people who have large money conversations and who fight about money all the time, who are ultimately unhappy and end up separating, like just plain and simple, that's not great for your financial future. That's gotta add a layer of complication to everything you were working on.
Yeah, never mind the family impact and the social impact. The financial impact is devastating too. So, and that does bring up the point that as we're talking about, everybody has their own normal. One of the great things, and it's never too late, one of the great things about having these conversations is you can determine what's our new normal going to be. I know what yours is, and I know what's our new normal going to be, and what's it going to be for our kids. And what are the mistakes that we saw growing up with money that we don't want to replicate with our kids? And what are the things that maybe were modeled really, really well for us that we want to make sure get modeled really well?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, there are so many good things that can come from just having the having the confidence to step up and say, hey, let's have this conversation. And if having it with a third party helps to kind of get it rolling the right direction, all the better.
Well, and John, I mean this is a huge compliment, but one of my favorite things about, working with you and seeing your office and seeing all the things that you do is there's so much intentionality in like how you take care of people. And I think that like that intentionality is a really powerful word. Is like you can be intentional about where you're going. You can be intentional about the finances. You can be intentional about the conversations. And it really does shift almost everything else, doesn't it?
It does. It's funny. I've kind of shared with people for years. Families spend more time planning their vacation than they do their finances. You don't just hop in the car and drive, and then when you're halfway through your vacation money, you turn around and start coming back. No, you pick where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? What are we going to spend? What are the things we want to do when we're there? We spend all that time when we're talking about a vacation, yet we don't talk about what's retirement going to look like. What are we going to do when we get there? What do we want to be able to do when we get there? And if you take that and then reel it back to where you're at today, it's never too late to get the map pointed the right direction.
I love that. So, it's so important to have these conversations sort of early in a relationship. And I think one of the things that you said is like, if it doesn't matter where you're at in the relationship, if you haven't had them, now's a really good time. Mm-hmm. Why is it so important that if somebody's maybe not having these conversations, that they really consider like opening those dialogues right now?
You don't get run over by the train you see coming 3 miles away. And if you don't have the conversation and you ignore it and you ignore it and ignore it, when that train is 300 feet away, it's going to be a problem. And the sooner you can have that discussion and identify, what's your normal, what's my normal, what do we want our new normal to be, what are we looking to accomplish, and even not just young people. If let's say if you're I don't know, in your 50s, and you're wanting to retire when you're 65. If you get paid once a month, you've got 180 paychecks before retirement. So we've got 180 swings here to get this right. What do we need to be doing now to make sure that on number 180, we're where we want to be?
Oh, that's incredible. As people sort of like think about sort of setting up their retirement vision or like, having these conversations, are there specific topics or areas or things that are really important to talk about? Can you break down maybe some of the most important pieces of that like vision for the future?
Yeah, it gets back to looking at, where do we want to be 3 years from now? What's important to us financially? What do we want to look back on 3 years from now and say, wow, I can't believe we accomplished that. You've got to have, it gets back to that intentionality we're talking about. You've got to know where you're going on vacation. You got to know what you're trying to accomplish. And if you don't both share a passion about and are in agreement in, this is important. This is important enough that we are going to make changes to make this happen. If you can't get there, if only one party is involved, it's not going to work. You're not going to have success.
So I definitely hear like destination, right? Shared destination. I also hear sort of the communication, making sure that you're having that conversation along the way. There's got to be another like component to that too of like how much money do we need, right? Like that's got to be one of the most challenging conversations that you have as a financial advisor, is trying to help people come up with like, what is this mysterious number? How much is enough to retire? How do you start that conversation with a financial advisor?
Let's say we get past the debt issue and we've got a cushion in savings and we're ready to start saving for retirement. More often than not, when people will come in and I'll ask them, okay, do you have a retirement plan at work? Yes. Are you participating? Yes. How much are you putting in? Well, they match up to 3%, so I'm putting in 3%. Good. I'm glad you're participating, but your 3 and the company's 3 are not going to provide 3 meals a day in retirement. That's not enough. And just helping people understand, okay, well, I thought I was, I'm participating. Well, no, we have to kind of back into what is your number. And what I generally share with people to kind of give an idea of what the goal should be. And again, you can run the numbers. Everyone's situation is different. But if we look at professions that offer pensions today, and they're few and far between, but they do exist. When we look at how those are funded, it's usually about 12 to 15% of compensation, either through the employee money contributed or the employer money contributed. So if it takes that 12 to 15% when you're starting at age 24, 25 to fully fund a retirement in 35 years, that we need to understand that that's kind of the number we need to be aiming toward. And so for that couple that comes in and I'm putting in 3 and the company matches 3, that's awesome. We need to get that 6 to 12. And let's do it over a 3-year period, where every year you're going to bump up 2% because maybe you get a 2 or 3% pay raise. Well, we need to fund that retirement bucket if it's important and it's a shared priority. We give up some of that raise in the form of plowing some more money back in until we get up to that 12-ish% contribution level, and then reassess and see. Okay, based on where we're at now, am I on track? Or what does on track need to look like? It might mean some changes about spending. It might mean deferring on making a car purchase for a couple of years. But these sacrifices only work if everybody's on board with it and everybody understands this is why we're doing it. This is why it's important. Because more often than not, sadly, too frequently, people get up to 60 years old and they're looking, and there's now we're down, we're in the red zone, and they are not financially prepared. They can retire, but they're not going to be able to retire with the level of comfort that they thought they would at one point in time. So having those conversations, recognizing here's why we're making the sacrifice and here's what it will allow us to do down the road, without that buy-in from both parties, it's hard to have success with that.
John, I think that's so incredibly valuable, and I think that just for me at sort of my age and where I'm at financially, like the idea of going back and having that conversation is so incredibly important, and like this has been really inspiring to make me want to go like rethink some of those pieces and figure out intentionally what I'm trying to do. So I always like to end these with sort of this sort of call to action. This if somebody watched this like I did and they felt like it hit home and they felt like this is a conversation that I have not had enough. What's something they can do in the next 7 days to take action and improve their situation? Talking to their spouse, setting up something in a plan. What action should they take?
Setting aside, maybe this sounds wonky, but just a financial date night. And you don't have to go out. You don't have to go out and spend money, but have a night where you're going to dedicate to having that conversation. Also, if they want to call my office or go online and reach out to us, I've got this 20-minute Ask Me Anything policy, where if a couple's interested and they're genuinely trying to figure this out, we can book a Zoom, we can book a call, an in-office visit, and I can kind of help initiate that conversation and give them some homework, something to work toward that they can come back later and show success.
Yeah, John, that's incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I think that, as we're kind of in that time of thinking about, love is in the air in February and everything that is going on, having a conversation with your partner that's clear-eyed about where you're going in this journey together can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Nick. Thanks for the time.
John, thanks so much for your time today.
Security and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA, SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Individual tax or legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance reference is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal.